Which one'd you get?
I don't know. Nathan Jr., I think.
Give him here.
Here's the instructions.
Oh, he's beautiful.
Yeah, he's awful damn good. I think I got the best one.
I bet they were all beautiful. All babies are beautiful.
This one's awful damn good, though.
Don't you cuss around him.
He's fine, he is. I think it's Nathan Jr.
We are doing the right thing, aren't we, Hi? I mean, they have more than they can handle.
Ah, well, honey, we've been over this. And there's what's right and there's what's right, and never the twain shall meet.
But don't you think his mom will be upset? I mean, overly?
Well, of course she'll be upset, sugar, but she'll get over it. She's got 4 little babies, almost as good as this one. It's like when I was robbing convenience stores.
I love him so much.
I know you do, honey.
I love him so much.
I know you do. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm great.
Oh, great.
That's one of my favorite ones we've ever done. Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Tatum.
And I'm Geneva.
We are 2 friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. All right, we are back again. Hello, Geneva.
Hello, Tatum.
I just want to say before we jump into talking about what we've watched this week, for people who listened to our episode last week, we did initially say we were going to be reviewing Tropic Thunder this week. We decided against that because we wanted to choose a movie that we figured there was a good chance of both of us liking it. So yeah, obviously this week we are talking about the movie Raising Arizona. So thanks for understanding that pivot. But yeah,
we'll probably cover Tropic Thunder at some point. I would like to see it in full, but we thought it might be a better choice for later on.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, that being said, Geneva, can you share with us anything you've been watching this week?
Yes, just a couple things. So my roommate and I watched The Scarlet Pimpernel from 1982, which is I think it was a TV movie version of The Scarlet Pimpernel with Anthony Andrews and Jane Seymour, and then a young 1980s Ian McKellen playing the villain.
I love Ian McKellen.
Oh, he's great. He is so great. Yeah, he's great as the villain in this. Scarlet Pimpernel is just a story that's kind of always been close to my heart. I grew up reading the book over and over again. I watched this TV movie. I watched the 1930s version. I love them all. This is, I don't know, they combine the book with another book, so it's not strictly faithful. It kind of has a lot of other plot elements that are not in the original book. They have a whole plot line about trying to save the Dauphin of France, which is not in the original book. But it's still a good time. I really enjoy the chemistry between Anthony Andrews and Jane Seymour, Jane Seymour, just one of the most gorgeous people who's ever lived. And yeah, I had a great time rewatching this for like the millionth time. The only other thing that I watched this week was a movie called The Country Girl. This was the movie that Grace Kelly won the Academy Award for Best Actress for, controversially, over Judy Garland for A Star is Born. So I was very curious to see. If I'm being honest, I'm not the hugest Grace Kelly fan. Obviously she is gorgeous and she was in a lot of, wonderful classic films. I don't think she's the greatest actress in the world. I don't think she's terrible, but I think she's sometimes the weaker link in a lot of the movies that she's in. This was the movie where it's like Grace Kelly she's getting all de-glammed. She's playing a part that's very unlike her other roles, kind of a more normal looking woman who's kind of been like had a really hard life. I think she's pretty good in it. I do think it's a very good performance, probably the best performance that I've seen from her. Basically what the movie is about is she's the wife of a stage actor played by Bing Crosby, who has become an alcoholic ever since the death of their son. And Bing Crosby gets a chance to lead a new musical that's coming to Broadway. This is his first time leading a musical in a very long time. And he's trying to stay sober. She's trying to help him stay sober. But the producer of the musical, who's played by William Holden, he kind of comes in with these very particular ideas about what is going on between the two of them. And he kind of fixates on Grace Kelly as the source of all of their problems. And the truth is a bit more complicated than that. But the main interest of the movie is this kind of three-way dynamic where there are scenes between Bing Crosby and William Holden where one thing is explained, and then there are scenes between William Holden and Grace Kelly where another thing is explained, and you're trying to figure out what is the actual truth, what is actually going on in this marriage. And I think it's pretty good. I do think it kind of takes a turn toward the more melodramatic toward the end. Kind of becomes a little bit less interesting once everything is out in the open. There are elements about it that I found a little bit sexist, which is a bit disappointing because the first 2/3 of the movie, she's such a dynamic and interesting character, and you really want her to, come out on her own and really succeed. And then the way that her storyline is resolved, you're kind of like, well, I feel like she's just kind of, this is not really what I want for her. If she wants it for herself, I guess, but this does not seem like a great ending for her. But I don't know. It's an interesting movie. And if you're a fan of Grace Kelly or you're interested in seeing her in a different mode, I definitely would recommend it. So yeah, The Country Girl. And that was pretty much it for what I've seen this week.
Sounds like Julie Garland should have won for A Star Is Born.
Oh, Judy Garland 100% should have won for A Star Is Born. No, again, this is probably Grace Kelly's best role, at least that I've seen. And I do think she's very good in it. If it was not Judy Garland she was competing against, I'd be like, sure. But no, Judy Garland 100% should have won.
Yeah, she was fantastic in that film. I have not seen the Grace Kelly one, but I have seen Judy Garland's version of A Star Is Born. And
it's pretty undeniable.
Yeah. It would take a powerhouse performance to beat her out, I guess. But anyway, cool. Well, I'm glad you got to see that movie finally. I remember you talking about that when we watched A Star Is Born together, and you were like, wait, Grace Kelly beat her this year? I need to see this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you finally got to it. So yeah, as far as what I've been watching, I haven't watched too much, but Wes Anderson actually released a series of shorts on Netflix, and they're all adaptations of short stories written by the author Roald Dahl, which he also adapted one of his stories for one of his previous films, Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is an incredible movie.
I had forgotten that Fantastic Mr. Fox was originally a Roald Dahl story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you haven't seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, highly recommend. Even if you're not a Wes Anderson fan, Fantastic Mr. Fox is, I feel like, universally, I feel like anyone could like that movie. So highly recommend.
I need to see that one again because I think I saw it when I was too young to understand the Wes Anderson sensibility. Mm-hmm. I was a child, and I think my parents were like, it's an animated movie. You'll love it. And I was like, what is this? I'm sorry, what's going on? So I need to see it again.
Interesting. That's very different from my relationship with Fantastic Mr. Fox, because I remember, so Fantastic Mr. Fox was the first Wes Anderson movie I ever saw, and I saw it very, very shortly after it came out. It was like randomly playing on television one day, and I'd heard of it, and so I was like, oh, okay, it's on, I'll watch it. And I happened to start it when it was probably about 10 minutes in or whatever. And I was like, yeah, we'll just see what happens. And I couldn't look away from the TV. I was absolutely like in love with it. So it was right after it came out. So I was relatively young and I'd never seen Wes Anderson. And I was like, oh, animated movie, cool. And then I was like, oh my God, this is so good. But anyway, yeah. So I watched, he released 4 shorts on Netflix. They're called The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, The Swan, The Ratcatcher, and Poison. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is about, I think it's like 47 minutes long. And then the other 3 are less than 20 minutes. So I watched all 4 of them kind of one after the other in one sitting. It was such a good time. It reminded me, of why I like Wes Anderson. So granted, I have not seen Asteroid City, which is his most recent release. But prior to Asteroid City, his last couple films I haven't been a huge fan of. The French Dispatch in particular, I felt like it would have been a lot better if he had released it in shorts as opposed to one film that was a bunch of shorts put together. So I liked that this route, he actually made them separate shorts. And I was like, these are amazing. I mean, they differ in terms of like how much I like them story wise. I think that The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is like hands down my favorite. I think it's almost perfect in terms of the story, the cast, the acting, but also the practical effects and how it's shot and put together and the production design. There's so much of it that I don't even understand what's real and what's not and how the transitions are happening and just the way that actors are delivering their dialogue. It's really, really incredible. I mean, my jaw, like my mouth was on the floor. I was like, I cannot even comprehend how this was made. It's very impressive. And then the other ones, I did like the other ones, but they kind of went down a little bit in terms of how much I liked them as time went on. Poison, I like. It's very funny. It's very funny. It's basically Benedict Cumberbatch like laying like on a bed completely still because there's a snake on his stomach that's gonna bite him and kill him, and he's like, if I move, it will bite me and I will die. Someone please help. It's very funny. And then the other two, The Swan and The Ratcatcher, they're good. But in terms of like The Swan is actually very tragic and very depressing and very sad. But you don't really recognize that until the end. It's kind of just like, where's this story going? Visually, it's not as captivating as the others. But by the end, it's a gut punch. It's like, whoa. Whoa, this is like, it's pretty dark at the end. And then The Ratcatcher it's good. It's a little bit more funny. It has Ralph Fiennes playing a rat catcher who is probably a rat, but we don't actually know. And it almost has like a horror aspect to it. So it's really interesting. It's like The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is very much so like a classic Wes Anderson like drama that's got some humor in it. And then Poison is very much so just like a comedy. And then The Swan is like a tragic depression story. And then The Ratcatcher is like his version of a horror film. So it's really interesting. So yeah,
a Wes Anderson horror film sounds really intriguing.
After watching The Ratcatcher, I'm like, he needs to make a horror film because it was quite scary the way that he shot certain things. Because yeah, anyway, so it was just cool to see how his unique style lends itself to lots of different genres. And I've never seen him direct his actors to deliver dialogue quite like this before. I mean, Dev Patel is speaking. He's speaking so quickly and you don't know what he's saying. It's really, really good. So I would highly recommend, if anyone is a Wes Anderson fan, check it out. And I would say if you're not a Wes Anderson fan, at least watch The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. That one I think is just universally gonna connect with lots of people. The other ones maybe not so much. But yeah, they're really easy watches. They're super short. They're basically bedtime stories for adults. It feels like Ralph Fiennes is sitting there just reading you a bedtime story before you go to bed. That has just beautiful, calming visuals. Except for The Ratcatcher, which has some horrifying visuals. But yeah, it was very, very good. I'm glad to watch something from Wes Anderson that I really enjoyed, because when he hits it out of the park, he really hits it out of the park. And then when he doesn't hit it out of the park, it just leaves me wanting, because I'm like, oh, it could have been so much. It's so close, but I feel disappointed. But I felt very satisfied watching these. So yeah, but that's all I've been watching this week. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I've seen the ads for for those shorts, and I was thinking about checking them out, and I definitely will after your recommendation. I've not historically been the hugest Wes Anderson fan, but in the last couple of years I've caught up on his earlier films and really liked them, so I'm hoping that will be a gateway into me being able to rewatch and appreciate better some of his later work.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, and probably Poison as well. The Swan might lose you a little bit. I don't know. The Swan lost me a little bit until the end, and I was like, oh, this is where the story's going, and it's really upsetting. But yeah, I don't know. I recommend you give it a shot. So yeah. But all of that being said, let's switch to Raising Arizona, which is another film that's kind of like lighthearted and a mixture of lots of genres, and in my opinion, just kind of a pleasant watch that makes you feel good inside. And maybe that's not your reaction at all, but that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, so today on the show, we are discussing the Coen Brothers' second.
Insane.
I'm just going to like hold that in the air for a minute. Yeah. This is their second feature film. Okay, everyone hear that? Cool. Moving on. Their second feature film, Raising Arizona, released in 1987. The film tells the story of an ex-con named Hi, or H.I., and his wife, Ed. The two meet several times as Ed, a local cop, is the one assigned to taking Hi's mugshot and logging him into the books each time he is incarcerated for robbing convenience stores. Eventually, Hi falls in love with Ed and decides to get straight so that they can marry and begin a happy life together. Things get complicated, however, when Ed, who desperately wants to have children, finds out that she is barren. The two then decide to kidnap a child from a group of quintuplets whose parents have, quote, more than they can handle, unquote.
According to Ed, not according to the parents themselves.
According to Ed. At first, it appears that they have achieved the family life that they have long wanted, but the excitement fades quickly as many try to claim or reclaim the baby, Nathan Jr., for themselves. Even reading that, it's like, what is this movie? It's such a brilliant premise. But yes, so after the critical success of their first film, Blood Simple, released just a few years earlier in 1984, the Coen brothers wanted to pivot and make another film that had an entirely different tone, one that was more upbeat. After completing the script in 3.5 months, the Coen brothers, with a budget of $5.5 million, shot the film in 10 weeks. Though Raising Arizona was not a critical success at the time, it was a huge financial success, earning about $29 million at the box office. Relationships behind the camera were not as successful, however. The Coen brothers, who have now formed a reputation for being extremely particular and calculated in how they like to shoot, were difficult for Nicolas Cage to work with. Frustrated at times that his suggestions were being ignored, Cage has been quoted saying that Joel and Ethan have a very strong vision, and I've learned how difficult it is to accept another artist's vision. Regardless, Raising Arizona proved that the Coen brothers were here to stay and had a bright future as filmmakers and screenwriters ahead of them. And just a fun fact about this movie is that while creating the dialect for the characters in this movie, Joel and Ethan actually created a hybrid of like a local dialect and also what they assumed the reading material of these locals would be, which they thought would be magazines and the Bible. So kind of taking that context, that was how they came up with the dialect for the characters in this film. And then one thing I just also wanted to throw out there, which, you know, it's just me saying things because I have a chip on my shoulder. But so this was their second film. Their first film was Blood Simple. They had no film experience making Blood Simple. They had no,
oh my gosh,
like, they didn't go to film school. They'd never used a camera. They'd never written a script. Out of nowhere, they made Blood Simple. They somehow raised $1.5 million in a year to make Blood Simple. How? And then now they're making Raising Arizona, and now they're obviously legends that all of us know today. But I just wanted to mention that because, again, I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm happy for them. It's great. But also, like, life isn't fair. Anyway. But yeah, so yeah, all of that being said, we can go ahead and jump into just the specifics of this movie itself. So Geneva, can you share with us your relationship to this movie and your experience while watching it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd never seen this movie before. I've seen quite a few other Coen Brothers movies. By no means the majority of their filmography, because they have a lot of movies, but I've seen several, and I've liked to loved all Coen Brothers movie that I've seen, and this was no exception.
Yes.
I really, really enjoyed this movie.
Woohoo!
It's very funny, very charming. It had been on my list for quite a while because, you know, people make lists of, you know, the best comedies or the best Coen Brothers movies. This is always close to the top. I feel like I'd not avoided it, but it kept getting bumped down from the top just because I can sometimes be a little sensitive when it comes to the way that babies and small children are used in films in terms of, you know, babies being put in positions of danger, the idea of kidnapping, things like that. I can just kind of be sensitive about that sometimes. But I didn't need to have worried about this movie. They do a really good job of maintaining the right tone. When I was looking at Letterboxd reviews after finishing this movie, the phrase that kept coming up was Looney Tunes cartoon, which I think is very accurate. There's a very zany Looney Tunes cartoonish sensibility to a lot of the action in this movie. And so, you know, gunshots are flying all over the place and the baby keeps falling off of cars and and yet he's completely unscathed. And it's this crazy heightened world where violence is not real, you know, everyone is going to be fine. And I think it really works for the subject matter. You know, this would not work as well as it did if they didn't have such a great grasp of tone, which again makes it insane that this is their second movie and the first time doing a comedy, because I know that their first film was a very different genre. This movie is extremely well made as well. Like, there are just some shots that I was just, how did they film this? how did they do this? There's some stunts in this movie that you would not expect for a comedy. I mean, I guess it's an action comedy, but yeah, there are also parts that like there's that chase sequence where they start running through the house that really reminded me of Point Break, which came out like 3 or 4 years later, which is an action movie I love. And I was like, I wonder if Catherine Bigelow saw Raising Arizona and decided to take that on. But yeah, and I think the performances are very, very good. It's really interesting to hear that Nicolas Cage clashed with the Coen brothers a bit, because obviously he is such a strong and idiosyncratic performer, but I also think of him as being someone who's very good at being able to bend to the needs of the film. And even if it was difficult for him, you know, especially, I don't know how far he was into his career, but, you know, a much younger actor than he is now, I think he did a really good job in the end of kind of channeling all of his strengths as a performer into what this film needs. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this movie because I liked it a lot. And it's also kind of unexpectedly poignant. Like, it's a Looney Tunes cartoon for 85 minutes. And then at the end, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, and now I'm kind of tearing up a bit.
What's the purpose in a way that family?
I wouldn't have expected. Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. I'm glad you chose it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's interesting because Nicolas Cage, like, in terms of his career, he was really just at this time coming out with a lot of great roles. I mean, he was in Raising Arizona, and then I think Moonstruck was his next film after this. And then
I was wondering if Moonstruck was before or after. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Moonstruck was after, and then, you know, a few years later, he worked with David Lynch on Wild at Heart, and it's just like, from the very beginning, he's just been taking so many different types of roles that are giving him room and space to kind of be wild and weird, but also show off his acting chops. I don't know. I don't know. One of these days, I'm going to do the thing and just watch all of Nicolas Cage's movies in order and just kind of study. Did he always know who he was as an actor from the very beginning? And has he just been consistent with that throughout? Or has he gone through different phases? I don't know. I've seen a fair number of his films, but he's been in like 500. So, but yeah, I just find him to be a really fascinating actor. And where this falls specifically in his career, I find to be really interesting. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, so I'm really glad you liked this movie. I hoped that you would. But so I saw this movie for the first time a few years back. I think I've mentioned on this podcast before that a few years ago, I had a list that I considered to be, you know, if you're going to call yourself a film person, you have to have seen all of these movies. And on that list was a bunch of Coen Brothers films because they're very well-known directors, very highly respected. But the handful of movies that I had seen from them prior to this list, I wasn't really a huge fan of. And so I was never really itching to see more of their movies. But then when I went through this list, I was like, okay, I have to do this. I have to watch Coen Brothers movies. And I realized going through that list that I actually love the Coen Brothers. I've seen, I think, probably 95% of their movies at this point. I love the films that they make. I love their tone. They have such a great idea of how they want their films to look, and which, you know, everybody knows they are known for showing up on set, having the entire film storyboarded and their entire scripts written, and they're like, we will not change the storyboard and we will not change the script. It is what it is. And I think that really comes through in the films that they make. They have a very clear vision and it's beautiful. But that being said, yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by this movie the first time I saw it. I just went into it like, okay, I'm watching a Coen Brothers film. I didn't expect to like cry laugh. I have such a distinct memory in my brain of how the babies are shot in that scene when Hai breaks into the home to steal the kid. Like the way that they're shooting all of these babies crawling around the floor, and it's just it's incredible how they're shooting these kids. And it's just, I mean, the introduction to the film is so great, how we have this whole, you know, backstory / montage of him getting arrested and then, you know, meeting Ed multiple times. And then, you know, it's just, and the score is so good of like this yodeling man with a banjo. I remember after watching this movie for the first time, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so funny. Top to bottom, I thought it was an excellent film. And so this was my second time watching it since then. I honestly think I like it more this time around, if that's even possible. It's so funny and it's so well made. It's really impressive that this is their second film. I mean, it's insane. You know, gotta love some Frances McDormand. She was discovered by the Coen Brothers in their first film, Blood Simple, which is incredible. And they really solidified from the very beginning, like, we're going to be directors that work with the same actors over and over, because they've worked with Frances McDormand many times, obviously John Goodman a gazillion times. So yeah, this movie is just super fun. I think that you could be nitpicky about it and be like, what's the purpose of this motorcycle guy? He's kind of tacked on, like, where is he coming from? But the film is just so much fun, and you could argue, is there really any logic to this story at all? That it doesn't really matter. So it's a fun time. I love this movie. I think it's super well made. And I think it's unique to see comedies that aren't just funny, but also are very creative in terms of how they shoot and like beautiful to look at the same time. So yeah, this movie's very special.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this is why Game Night, which came out like 4 or 5 years ago, is such a great modern day comedy that you don't see very often, because that's also very visually inventive. Yeah. This movie, sorry, as you were talking, I was looking up the cinematographer for this movie was Barry Sonnenfeld, who's a director in his own right, who did the Addams Family films and the Men in Black films, among other things. Like, he's a very visually inventive, you know, very talented director in his own right, and he was the cinematographer for this. So there's just an insane level of, you know, talent and skill who's got together and was able to work on this movie together and produce something really special.
Yeah, and I think he's collaborated with the Coen Brothers a few times. I don't know the other films they've worked on together, but again, the Coen Brothers like to work with the same people, so they very famously have collaborated with Roger Deakins a lot.
Yeah. And one thing that I learned recently when the Blank Check podcast did a series on Sam Raimi is that the Coen Brothers and Sam Raimi have been friends for a long time. I think they might have been roommates for a point. And you can see a lot of visual influences in Sam Raimi's films and the Coen brothers, like the ways that they would have influenced each other. You know, they have similar sensibilities when it comes to kind of action comedy, which I think is very cool.
Yeah. I always love hearing those stories about people who seem unrelated, and then you find out that they were roommates. It's just so strange how that happens. But I guess it makes sense. So, oh my gosh, Geneva, guess what? Mm-hmm. I just looked him up. Barry Sonnenfeld. He was the cinematographer for When Harry Met Sally.
Oh, I did not realize that. Oh man, we should have mentioned that in our When Harry Met Sally episode.
Yeah, so he worked with them on Blood Simple, which I did know. And then Raising Arizona, he also was a cinematographer for Big, When Harry Met Sally, and their film Miller's Crossing, which is an interesting movie, Miller's Crossing. But yeah, anyway, I think
I really, now after this, I really want to go and watch Blood Simple to see, because like so much of what I think of as the Coen brothers brand and sensibility and dialogue style and shooting style is so solidified here. And I'm curious, you know, how much of it that is in place for Blood Simple too. Because when you were talking about the idea of the dialect that they created for this film, like, so it's such a classic Coen brothers dialect, that way of speaking where it's kind of the southern accents and kind of talking in circles and saying something really inane, but then using all these like really fancy words and saying some really deep piece of philosophy that you've quoted from, you know, the Bible or from, you know, some random philosopher, but kind of twisted a little bit. It's all there, you know. That's just something they I just think of as being the Coen brothers style, and it's all, you know, fully formed in this movie.
Yeah, I love their style so much. When I went through their filmography a few years back, I was just like, one after the other, I mean, it's just incredible. Some people are just geniuses. They just are. And whether it's their first film or their 15th film, like everything they make is going to be good because they're the one in a million, you know?
Yeah. Just last night, my roommate was watching The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and I was doing something else, so I couldn't join her for most of it, but I caught the end, the final 20 minutes or so. And then it was just so funny watching Raising Arizona right afterwards and being like, wow, it's, you know, 25, 30 years later, and they're coming, you know, the themes that they're interested in, the way that they write their characters, the way that they set up, you know, the storytelling, like it's all so clear and consistent, and it's so well done.
Yeah. Yeah. Has the Blank Check podcast, have they done the Coen brothers? Did you say that they did?
No, they did Sam Raimi. They've not done the Coen brothers yet. I would love for them to do it.
Can we, and I can cut this out if it's too much, but would you be willing to look at their filmography and just tell me which of their films you've seen? I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, actually, I was looking that up while we were talking. Let me pull it back up. It's so funny how Wikipedia has, you click on Joel and Ethan Coen and it directs to the Coen brothers.
Yep.
Let's see. There it is. Okay. So Raising Arizona, Fargo, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And then not until True Grit, Inside Llewyn Davis, Hail Caesar, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So more their recent stuff. Yeah. And then Raising Arizona and Fargo and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I need to see The Big Lebowski. I need to see Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Hudsucker Proxy. I've been wanting to see Burn After Reading and A Serious Man for a long time. Yeah, there's a lot I need to see.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Raising Arizona, Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Fargo, Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, No Country for Old Men, Burn After Reading, A Serious Man, True Grit, Inside Llewyn Davis, Hail Caesar. I've seen like most of I've seen basically everything except for Blood Simple and
Did you say
The Man Who Wasn't There.
Did you say you haven't seen The Hudsucker Proxy, or you have?
I have not.
Okay. That's one where there's a clip from it that goes around Twitter every year or so, and every time I see it, it makes me laugh so much, and I think, oh, I need to see The Hudsucker Proxy, and then I haven't gotten around to it yet. Yeah.
I would be interested to, well, it's on my list, but I would be really interested to talk with you about A Serious Man. It's a very interesting film, as are all of their movies. But anyway, so back to this movie specifically. So I was trying to take notes while watching it, And it literally just ended up me writing down like a bunch of quotes because this movie is just so funny. But I guess I kind of want to start off by talking about this whole opening montage that we have that kind of introduces us to Ed, it introduces us to Hai, and just kind of them as two individuals before we get to the actual plot of what the rest of the movie is going to be. So yeah, what do you think about this opening sequence in any sort of way, in terms of how it's put together or how it introduces the characters or anything like that?
Oh man, the opening sequence is so good. It's I love the fact that it's all wordless. I mean, there's narration over top from Hai explaining what's going on, but it's all, just seeing the characters.
Turn to the right.
The chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter. Sorry, I keep doing that. Not Helen Hunt, Holly Hunter.
I get them confused all the time.
Yeah. The chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter is so good from minute one. Like the second they see each other, you can tell that they have a connection. And the idea of an ex-con and a cop getting together over the course of, a series, like they don't even talk to each other before he proposes, really. It's just a series of meetings while he's being booked in for like year-long stretches for robbery. It's just so funny. And yeah, I mean, it establishes early on this sort of, to the extent that there is any sort of theme or character development for these characters, but this idea that Hai is this person who he's pretty aimless, he doesn't really have a purpose, and he's just willing to keep on living this constant cycle of go out, rob a convenience store, immediately get caught because he's a terrible thief, and then get thrown in prison for a certain amount of time. And Ed is the one who breaks him out of it, who makes him realize, like, oh, there's something more that I could try and get out of life. And yeah, their love story is so sweet. Like, this movie is so sweet and so romantic in a really weird, hilarious way, It's just like, as soon as he realizes he wants her, he would do anything for her. He would move the world for her. And even though he is, he still has to work on himself and getting himself out of his old crime committing ways. Like, he loves her so much, and it's very sweet. Anyway, yeah, I love the opening scene.
Yeah, I think it's great. I love movies where you don't think there's going to be a title sequence, but then they shock you with a title sequence and you just say, "Oh, that whole thing was just an intro." And if that's the intro, then I'm totally down for the rest of this ride, And there's a few movies that do that, or that have done that to me, where I wasn't expecting there to be one, and then there is. Like Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave does that, and then Pulp Fiction does that. There's lots of movies where
Drive My Car famously has a title sequence like 50 minutes into the movie.
Oh, that's what I meant. Drive My Car, not Decision to Leave. My bad. But yeah, I love this opening sequence. I think, like you said, it does such a good job of establishing these characters and their relationship to each other. And I also just love that we know exactly who Hai is before we even know what he does, because his hair is absolutely insane. His clothing, like, he is such, from the very beginning, this is a distinct, unique person who's who's definitely quirky, but also doesn't really know it. And even if he does, he doesn't care, because he's just being who he is. And I think that that's so great that we learn that from the very beginning. But he's also kind of an airhead. Like, he's not really the brightest bulb in the bunch.
Character design is so good, and the character design married to the casting is so good, because, like you say, his hair is insane, his clothes are all mismatched and sloppy, and it gives you this, the idea of this character. But Nicolas Cage, like, especially Nicolas Cage, he has these very soulful, sensitive eyes. Mm-hmm. And so you get this sense of this duality of this person, where he is like, he's a criminal, he's a slob, he's irresponsible and reckless, but he also has this very sweet, sensitive interior to him, It just makes him feel like such a full, like, well-rounded character.
And I think it helps you empathize with them throughout the rest of the story, because it establishes, in my opinion, that he's not a bad guy. Like, he's not a criminal who's wanting to hurt people. Like, they literally establish that whenever he robs convenience stores, his weapons are empty. And he says, well, I don't want to hurt anyone. You know, like, he's really just an idiot who's just,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know.
You never really get a sense of why he robs convenience stores to begin with, because it's not like he's incapable of getting a job. You know, it doesn't seem like he wants the high. It's just like he's bored and it's the only thing that he can think of to do, you know?
Yeah, it makes him feel alive, I guess. And it's the only way, I guess, he knows how to, I don't know. But it does such a good job of establishing who he is, but also helping us know that even though the rest of this movie he's going to be committing a crime that is kidnapping a child, you don't feel disgusted or horrified by that, because they've already established the type of person that he is, which is pretty harmless. And his intentions, for better or for worse, are like kind of wholesome.
Good.
I don't know.
There's this innocence to him, you know?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't fully understand the impact of what he's doing.
Yeah, and then the contrast between him having his look where it looks like a tornado flew him in the air and just landed him on the ground. The contrast between his look and then Ed's look, which is very like professional, put together. She's in a uniform, very like formal.
Her hair is slicked back. She's got her, you know, her police uniform is freshly starched, all that.
Yeah, she's very much so someone who follows the rules. She is a rule follower. And which I think also is a great setup for the rest of the movie, in terms of they are going to be breaking a pretty serious law, like stealing an infant from a family. And it's just this interesting dynamic that's set up of she has these things that she wants to do. And because she's married to someone who's kind of dumb and careless, she needs that in order to like help her loosen up a bit to actually break the rules. You get this idea that, you know, she helps him like pull himself together a little bit and like have a life purpose that's not just doing dumb things, but then he also helps her loosen up a little bit. And it's just this beautiful dynamic that I think is established very quickly. I think also, you know, we've kind of touched on this, but this opening sequence really just establishes what the tone of the film is going to be. Very light, humorous, kind of silly, like we're not living in the real world here, you know. It's just, we're just here to watch these weirdos live their lives that are kind of dumb, but also full of love. And I think it's very masterful how they establish that, and his protective nature when he finds out about her boyfriend or no, her fiance, who
my fiance.
Yeah, her fiance who left her or cheated on her. I forget which one it is. And he's like,
I love how she says,
you tell him to come find me. I'll be waiting. You tell him that I'm in cell block, blah, 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 blah,
so
blah.
Cute. I love the way that she pronounces fiance incorrectly.
Yes.
And then he pronounces it correctly.
Yes. My fiance. Yeah. And then
it's,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just in this opening sequence, I think it just also establishes something that is so, what I love so much about the Coen brothers, which is their ability to find humanity in such a wide range of people. You know, they have so much affection for all of their characters, and so much of their movies, and this movie in particular is, you know, it's set in among criminals, you know, jailbirds and scummy businessmen and bounty hunters and, you know, just like people who are not the most reputable, people who are constantly trying to do, you know, act selfishly or impulsively, and they're doing crimes and they're doing things that in the real world would help others, although not really in this world because this is a Looney Tunes world. But there's just so much love that they clearly have for their characters, and there's so much humanity that they're and empathy that they're able to find in all of the characters. And so, like, you know, he goes into the jail and you just get a sense that every single person around him in the jail has a story of their own to tell, and that he, you know, he has affection for them all, the directors have affection for them all, and then they get out, and with Gail and Evel, like, they're also these fully rounded characters who are terrible influences but also have a humanity and empathy of their own. And yeah, it's all established from the very first part of this movie.
I really like that moment when Hai is laying in his bunk bed and he's like, it's hard for you to think while you're in prison because blah, 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 blah. And then you see that his conversation with his bunkmate above him, he's talking about how like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. When I was growing up, we used to eat sand. And then Hai's like, you used to eat sand? He's like, yeah. It's like, okay, interesting. Because that also kind of clues in that Hai's an idiot, but he also is not fully an idiot. Like he's able to identify, oh, this might be kind of like weird. I don't know. Eating sand, like that doesn't, I'm pretty sure that'll kill you. Like if you just straight up eat sand. But yeah, so we get to kind of the conclusion of this sequence. And one of the things I love, which also continues, this tone is so established and it's carried on throughout. But when the Reverend or whoever it is marries them and they both say I do, and then the Reverend goes, okay, then.
I forgot about that.
It's like, all right, okay, then I guess we're here and all right, we're married now.
We'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I just think it's such a great opening, and I love the score to this movie. I love the banjo with the yodeling guy, like it's so great. And then that's what we hear as the title sequence kind of rolls up, and it's got the sunset behind it. It's such a great. I love a good opening montage. I actually should make a Letterboxd list about this. Just movies that have the best opening sequences because, I mean, tangent, but I just love movies that have great opening sequences. Like Baby Driver. I remember when I saw Baby Driver, I was like, oh man, that's such a great opening sequence. The movie kind of falls apart as it keeps going, but it's really hard to establish, a film so in such a, get the viewer invested so quickly. But anyway. So after this, we kind of learn that, like I said before, this is still in the opening sequence, but we find out that Ed is barren, even though she really, really, really wants to have children, which again, creating this sense of empathy for the characters, and it creates this justifiable logic as to why they steal this baby, because we find out that there's this guy who owns a furniture store whose name is what is it, something Arizona, what's his first name? Nathan Arizona. Yeah, Nathan Arizona is like a wealthy person in town who owns this furniture store who's always trying to sell furniture, and they have 5 kids, and I do actually think that they are quoted saying that they have more than they can handle, because they're just like interviewing them, and one of the things they say in like a newspaper article is like, yeah, we have more than we can handle, 5 kids. And then Hai and Ed obviously kind of take that to an extreme.
Take it literally.
Yeah, they take it very literally what they mean when they say that they have more than they can handle.
One thing to note, again, just with empathy for the characters too, that I thought was kind of an important detail in establishing why they take the step they do. So Ed is infertile, but they also can't adopt because Hai is has served multiple sentences in jail. And, from the outside, it's like, yeah, I can understand why a multiple time convict, like that would be against the adoption rules, but these characters, the film builds such empathy for them and for their situation that you're like, well, these two, they still have some things to figure out, but they clearly have a lot of love for each other and a lot of love to give to a potential child. And yeah, I just like that little detail of like, they're in this situation where there's no other recourse for this love that they have, that they really want to give to a child, and they're not able to.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, pretty quickly we learn that Hai and Ed are creating a plan to go steal one of the children for their own. So we have this incredible, my favorite sequence in the whole movie, where Hai brings a ladder to the Arizona's home, and he climbs up to the children's bedroom and is trying to decide which of the 5 children to take. And then complete chaos
I was like,
ensues.
what exactly is he doing? Because he like keeps taking them out and like putting them down, and then they're toddlers, so of course they're crawling all over the place. And he's like, "What? Oh no!" They're like, they keep escaping, and I'm like, "Well, stop taking them out of the crib."
And he keeps doing these like things where he's just putting a baby on a chair, and I'm like, that's not like don't put a baby on a chair and leave them there.
My favorite is when he's crawling under the crib to try and get one of the babies that crawled out of the crib, and the other baby like leaps down onto it.
Yep.
So funny.
And there's also a moment when you see him just like push two of the babies' heads over while they're sitting in the crib. It's just like, lay down. But yeah, this scene is so impressive to me because it's so funny in terms of, we have this outrageous concept of him trying to steal one of 5 babies, but then it's kind of juxtaposed with seeing the Arizona parents sitting downstairs. They're hearing all of these noises, but they won't go up there. They're just staring at the ceiling. And I'm like, do you want to go check on them? Like, why are you waiting so long? So I love the juxtaposition of, we cut to having all of this chaos upstairs, and then we cut to downstairs. It's just them sitting there looking up, staring at the ceiling.
So perfectly calm and ordered. They're just kind of like sitting and reading the newspaper, and they're just like, But actually, there is one tiny little detail in that where the first baby starts crying, and the dad is like, that sounds like Larry. Because, of the 5 kids, it's like Harry, Barry, Larry, Gary, and Nathan Jr., which is very funny. But I did like that moment because it's just a sense of like the Nathan Arizona and his wife, I forget what her name is, they're very, very different from Hi and Ed. They're wealthy, kind of probably snobby people. Their house is huge and gorgeous. Not my style, but it's like very much more expensive. But you do get a sense that like even though they do have all of these kids and they're very different personalities, I do think there is a sense that they do love their kids. So it's not like, I don't know, I think this movie does a really good job of riding the line where you're like, well, I think it would be good for the kid to be with Hi and Ed and experience something very different for a short period of time. But at the same time, it's not like they're going back to parents. The child is going back in the end to parents who don't love them. Like I think it does a very good job of establishing that even though Nathan Arizona and his wife are very, very different in their situation and their personalities than Hi and Ed, they do still love their kids, and they do really care when one of them is kidnapped.
Different parenting styles, But yeah, so I just want to kind of talk a little bit about how this scene with the babies is shot, because again, that was the thing that really, really drew me aback the first time I watched this movie, and what has stuck with me even up until watching this movie again. Just the way that they shoot this whole sequence with these babies, it's like a masterwork of cinematography, but they're filming babies,
Yeah.
Like that moment you're talking about where the kid climbs over the crib and falls down, the way that shot of the camera being like the point of view of the child. And then, we have the camera, on a dolly following these babies while they crawl on the floor. And it's so impressive how it's shot, in my opinion. Like it looks beautiful. I'm just like the not to use the word juxtaposition again, but like the juxtaposition of having something shot in a way that is so masterful and beautiful and interesting and dynamic with complete nonsense and chaos is so interesting to me. But yeah, I'm curious, like when you were watching this scene, were you struck by how it was shot as well? Because I just was completely blown away.
Yeah, there were multiple times in this movie where I just had to kind of sit back and be like, this cinematography is incredible. There's so much moving camera. There's so much handheld. There's so much POV that's happening in this film. Again, you can really see the cross influences between them and Sam Raimi. And it's very impressive. It's so well choreographed. I mean, they always say never work with animals or children because it's just, they're just a nightmare to work with. They do such a great job of selecting 5, probably 10, because I'm sure they probably had to have doubles, infants who all look exactly the same. And then just choreographing all of their movements. The babies are turning and smiling and getting up and down at just the right moment to make it really funny. The way the camera is moving around and interacting, you get the sense, you're right with Hai and feeling like this whole situation is just spinning out of control. And he turns around and there's suddenly another baby in a place where they shouldn't
One's
be.
crawling out the door.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So yeah, it's very impressive. And then it also helps too that just a word of appreciation for the production design in this movie. All of the sets are so well designed. I mean, the way that their Hai and Ed's house is designed is this kind of, 1980s lower class mobile home. It's perfect. And the design of the baby's it's a very big nursery. And it's so colorful. It has this really deep blue carpeting. It gives a perfect sense of this as the house of an older couple who suddenly has kids, and they just went all out and bought every single toy that they could possibly find. And the room is just wall to wall, just various stuffed animals and toys and pictures on the walls and everything like that. And it all works together really, really well.
Yeah, I find it not interesting, but when you were talking about the babies, you made me think about kind of how you were saying before that all the characters in this movie feel very well-rounded and you feel like you know them. The babies feel like trained actors to me. I feel like that has to do with the fact that the Coen brothers are very specific. Like they have it all planned out. They have their storyboard. They know how they want it to look. So they have a very clear idea of this is how we want this scene to go, and we need a shot of the babies doing this. Whereas maybe other directors, because babies can be kind of unpredictable, they might go with the flow a little bit more to adjust to how the babies might be responding, which, to each their own. It works or it works, depending on,
as long as the baby's
whoever.
Being treated well, either way it can turn out fine.
But I think the fact that the Coen brothers are so specific in terms of what they want and how they want to tell it, I feel like they were very clearly specific in how they shot the babies, and they kept shooting until they got what they wanted. And the result of that is these babies, like I said, they feel like trained actors. They feel like the Coen brothers were like, okay, sit there, make this face, now do this, and the babies are following direction. It's just so impressive to me how they do that. And I also wanted to make sure we just mentioned that we have this moment where Hai kind of gives up and he leaves, and Ed's like, no, you will not come back here without a baby. You will go back in and get me a baby. And so he goes back in again, and then he manages to get Nathan Jr. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we spent a fair amount of time on this scene because it's my favorite scene of the movie. It's the perfect combination of the chaos that exists in this movie with the comedy that exists in this movie, with the beautiful cinematography, like you said, production design, seeing the characters, establishing the characters, seeing them be themselves. It's a masterful sequence. I really, really love it. So yeah. And then after this, we have the moment that Geneva and I quoted at the beginning of this movie where Hai gets to the car and gives Ed the instructions.
These are the instructions.
These are the instructions of how to take care of a kid. I should have written down the title of the book. I forgot to do that.
Dr. Spock's Guide for Raising Babies, which is a real and very famous baby book from, I think, maybe the 50s.
Yeah. So great instructions.
Yeah.
And then we have just this, I don't know. I feel like this scene does a really good job of establishing, at least in my opinion, that Hai is not the only insane person in this relationship. Because I feel like up until this point, Ed kind of seems like, she's his police officer.
She's the more normal, the more responsible.
She wants to have kids. She's upset that she can't. Obviously when she finds out she doesn't have kids, she has a little bit of a funny cry that she does in that scene. But you don't really get a sense that she's a little bit cuckoo as well until we have this sequence where she's like, get me a baby. And then just...
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think they had established a little bit earlier that the whole plan to kidnap the baby was Ed's plan in the first place. Hai is very much just going along to make her happy.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, just a word of, we've said so much about Nicolas Cage and how brilliant he is. A word of appreciation for Holly Hunter, who is fantastic in this movie. She does such a good job of being the counterweight, and she's just a world-class funny crier. I was telling Tatum before we started recording about the movie Broadcast News, which is a great movie, and she does a very funny cry in that as well.
Yeah. So she really, it just establishes this relationship between them where she is kind of taking the reins and he's just reacting, you know.
He's just along for the ride.
Yeah, he's just reacting in whatever way he can, because clearly he cares about her, and he feels her emotions and he wants to help her. That's why he comes up with the idea of stealing the baby. That's why he tries to comfort her when she's like, not comfort, but she's freaking out saying, I love him so much. He's like, yeah, I know you do. Like, and the first time he says it, it's just like, I know you do, honey. And then the second time it's him genuinely being like, I know, like, I know. And it's this beautiful relationship where both of them are kind of crazy, but it works, you know? So
they're just they're crazy, but they just feel, you know, they complement each other in such perfect ways. They balance each other out.
Yeah. So after this, they go home and they try and take a family photo, which doesn't really work out. It's quite a funny family photo. I like it. But then after they get home with the baby, then we cut to a moment where we see High's his convict friends digging out of prison, screaming like maniacs.
Which this movie came out, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before Shawshank Redemption. And there's an almost identical scene of what's in Shawshank of the convicts covered in mud, like in the rain, screaming at the sky. As
shot by Roger Deakins, interestingly.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just absolutely just nonstop screaming for a very long time. Just
the visual of them, you know, they've just tunneled out of prison, and so theoretically they're coming out of holes in the ground, but the way it's shot and with the rainstorm, you can't see the hole. It's literally them just poking their heads up above the mud as if they've just been birthed by the earth.
Yep.
And it's insane.
Yep. And then he pulls the guy out by his foot, like he's in there upside down, I guess. Like, I don't know. But yes, then they break out of prison, and the first thing they do is they go to a gas station and gel their hair back with so much pomade. So much pomade. I'm like, oh, my Lanta. Like, that is so much.
Did they bring the pomade with them?
Of course they did. I have no idea. They probably stole it. I don't know. Yeah. But either way, they both look great.
Covered in mud.
So great. But then they see fit to go over to High's home and be like, hey, what's up? And I found it interesting that, you know, again, just kind of uncovering more layers of High's character. He hears a knock at the door, and him and Ed are kind of like, who is that? And then High's like, I'm gonna go check it out. And he picks up this little, you know, revolver gun, and he like flips it in his hand, like expertly. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this guy knows how to handle a weapon, even though his weapons have always been unloaded when he's shoplifting. The way that he like holds this thing and like flips it around, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's another aspect to his character that I wasn't expecting. You know, I would think that High would be someone where he tries to do that and he fumbles it and it falls on the ground or something. But it's like, no, okay, that's interesting. But yeah, so he goes and he finds his friends who basically just invite themselves in and just decide to stay there now.
Yeah, they kind of guilt High into letting them stay, because Ed is like, no, we have a child, you guys are escaped convicts, you gotta go. And they're all like, hey, High, who wears the pants in this family? Yep. And High is like, fine. Like, he's so much a guy who just wants everyone to get along. He just wants to please, you know, the people that he cares about. And so he's trapped in this awkward position between his old friends and his wife, who's like, no, I don't like this. And she's, of course, completely correct.
Well, I find it so funny that Ed, she seems to be a bit delusional in the sense that she's like, we have a family now. You know, this is, we're a long-standing family, and, you know, we're a normal family, and we're a healthy
we can
family.
only associate with decent people.
Yeah, like we can't have ex-cons here. And I'm like, you literally just stole a child. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But she has this idea of just like this, and her and Hai both, you know, they have this idea of what they want their beautiful family to look like. And they're so focused on that they don't really recognize that their family's actually incredibly unhealthy and dysfunctional. But yeah, so basically they get to a point where, you know, Hai and Ed agree, you know, 2 days tops, you know. And so the guys, they get to stay. And then the next morning we see interviews with the Arizonas talking about how their kid is gone. And I wrote down this amazing quote where people are asking Nathan Arizona questions, and someone mentions something about UFOs, and he goes, no, don't mention UFOs. If his mama reads that, she's just gonna lose all hope. And I'm like, what?
So funny.
Like, what do UFO like? What are you talking about?
Like, what about the rumors that the kid has been kidnapped by UFOs? And he's like, don't tell my wife that. She's, you know, we don't want her to lose
all hope. As if like she would believe that UFOs came and took her child. Like,
so good.
I just thought that was a really, I feel like there's so many throwaway lines in this movie where like people just say it and it comes and it goes. And it's like, wait a minute. That was kind of insane that they just said that. But anyway, so yeah, we have that nice little clip, and then we find out that Ed and Hai, they have good people coming over to visit and meet their child. And so Ed is like, these two guys, they've got to get out of here.
Oh, there's one thing that I think happens before this that's kind of important, which is that first night after they kidnap the child, and then the Gail and Neville show up on their door. Hai has this dream about this creepy biker guy named Smalls, who is like, you know, he's like this nightmarish figure who loves torturing small, innocent, harmless things.
With grenades.
And rides a motorcycle and has these double shotguns. And he feels like what he's done has kind of birthed Smalls onto the world. And then we find out in a few scenes that Smalls actually exists. So there is this, apparently Hai is like has prophetic dreams.
Yeah.
Psychic. So anyway.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. But yeah, so after this, they have a decent family come over to visit. So they kick the two guys out of the house, and the people that come over, apparently it's Hai's boss, because he was able to get a job at like a mechanic or not mechanic, some sort of like metal company.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so his boss and his wife and their children come over for lunch.
They're like 17 like nightmare children.
Gosh,
all
so many kids.
Terrors.
I wrote down this one line. I don't remember specifically when it happens, but I think it's something where I think it's when Ed is kind of telling Hai, you know, like Evel and Gail need to get out of here. We have people coming and da-da-da. And Hai goes, so many social engagements, so little time. It's like, okay. But yeah, so the family comes over with all these kids, and they're also insane. Their kids are hitting their car with sticks and running around screaming,
writing fart on the wall.
And apparently their dad just like sees fit to scream, hit the deck, boy, and throw objects at their goes like, hit the deck, boy, and he throws, I don't even know what it is, it's like candy, like a handful or something.
of M&Ms or something.
Yeah, and his kid just like drops to the ground. I'm like, why? I don't know. Apparently it's just the dynamic of this family. And then we have his wife just being like, oh my gosh, you have to have a doctor for this child. You don't have a doctor? What about this doctor?
They got to get their dip tet.
Yeah.
Have you set up the dip tet yet? And poor Ed is like, what? No.
Do we have a doctor, honey? Honey, we need to get a doctor. What about this, honey? And it's, obviously this woman, we have to say, she's played by Frances McDormand, the one and only.
The great Frances
McDormand.
Who's, of course, married to Joel Coen.
This is true. which I kind of love that. But yeah, so then we have this moment where, you know, Hai goes for a stroll with his boss. And so at this point, he's starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed because after I can't find Dot, that's Frances McDormand's character's name. After, you know, Dot is kind of telling Ed about all these things, and Ed is like, do we have a doctor? Do we need a blah, blah, blah? He's definitely feeling overwhelmed. He's very like, oh my gosh, I was not aware that now I have to take care of all of these things. What am I going to do? And so he goes walking with his boss, and his boss is just talking, and he's very clearly not really paying attention to what his boss is saying. And then his boss gets to a point where he's like, you know, I know what it's like. You feel like maybe you've lost the excitement in your life and you don't know where your purpose is anymore and blah, blah, blah. And then he very openly states, he's like, yeah, so me and Dot are swingers. So, you know, we could make an arrangement where, you know, like your wife's hot. So, you know,
oh my God,
and then Hai,
so inappropriate.
Hai is ridiculous. Justifiably very upset and proceeds to punch him in the face, which, you know, then creates this dynamic where Hai ends up having to tell Ed, he's like, yeah, pretty sure I lost my job.
She's like, why? What did he say? And he was like, he was provoking me. And Hai's like, what did he say? And Hai's like, never mind. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So after this sequence, then we go into the long, very long scene.
Oh my God.
Of Hai trying to get Huggies diapers.
Trying to rob a convenience store for Huggies diapers.
Yes.
This is such a good chase scene.
And
it's so well done.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of run through the progression of what happens in this chase scene, and then we can break it down as much as we want to, because it is kind of one thing just kind of rolls into another, which
just escalating lunacy.
It is kind of classic Coen Brothers in a lot of ways. A lot of their films, they start with something small, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this is really big. This is out of control. Oh my God, like wow. But yeah, so hang with me here. Fill in the spaces if I forget any moments, because I don't have this specifically written down, so I'm like going off of memory. But so he walks in to a convenience store to get some Huggies, but he has no intention of paying for them. He's going to steal them, which we get an idea that he's kind of feeling the itch to rob again after having this conversation with his boss, who is kind of letting him know, like, yeah, you feel like kind of the adventure's gone now that you have a kid.
Going back to his old patterns.
Yeah. So
his old comfort zone.
Yeah. So he goes in, he steals these Huggies diapers, he runs out, he gets in the car, he hears the cops coming because the convenience store guy has like a button to push, which alerts the cops that he's being robbed. And then they start driving. No, I think he starts running, and then he's running from the cops. He drops the Huggies in the middle of the road. The cops are chasing him. They're running. They're driving in the car. All of these things. They're shooting like maniacs. I'm pretty sure cops can only shoot in self-defense. And they're like running through grocery stores, shooting at all of the innocent bystanders. Like,
they fully run through someone's home. Like, he just like crashes through a door, runs through their home, runs out the backyard.
There's children, and they're just shooting I'm like, these are terrible cops. But then he ends up climbing over a fence. He finds out there's a dog in there that's chained, and then he's like, oh shoot, I have to run away from this dog. The dog breaks loose because the chain like comes out of the ground. So then the dog's chasing him, and then the dog starts gathering more dogs. So now he's being chased by lots of dogs. And he keeps trying to find his wife, but she keeps missing him, driving in circles. And then he gets picked up by another person and like sits in his truck. And then the cops are following them. And then he's like, oh, wait, no, there's my wife. And then he like yada, yada, yada. He ends up back in the car with his wife. They drive by. He picks up the Huggies and they go home. So I did write down this one line from this sequence that I really loved, which again is just hinting at Ed being kind of a little bit delusional. But she's yelling at High when he initially steals the Huggies, and she just says to him, "We've got a child now. Everything's changed." The way she says "changed" is absolute. I'm like, where did that come from? It's so shocking to me because she feels so like, more than anyone else in this film, she feels like the most normal one, kind of. And then she comes out with these moments, and I'm like, oh no, she's not normal at all.
She's very like, I don't know, she's kind of on a knife's edge where it's just like she's so, at the beginning of the film, so kind of buttoned up, but you get the sense that there's this deep well of lunacy within her that she's just never allowed herself to express. And then through this whole adventure is her kind of channeling all of that craziness into something that she really, really wants.
Yeah.
It is so funny how because she doesn't know that he's going into the convenience store to rob it. And then she's like reading this book to to little Nathan Jr. and she's doing all these funny voices and everything. But then she sees him committing the robbery and she's just like, "You son of a bitch." And like, you know, after yelling at him for cussing in front of the baby. And then she just like gets in the driver's seat and just like drives off yelling at him. Two things too that so in that chase scene, the part where it's revealed that the little teenage clerk that got robbed has his own gun and he starts shooting back.
Yes.
I just fully lost it. He's just like so gleefully just like firing off. And then I love how, because, you know, he tries to get the Huggies from the convenience store. He drops them in the road. Then he's getting chased around. He runs into the grocery store and then he's like running down the aisles trying to find some Huggies and he gets a new thing of Huggies.
Yes.
But then the cop is like blocked off the road and he has to throw the Huggies at the cop to get away. And so he's just like, he just wants the Huggies, you know?
Just let him have the diapers for his child.
Yeah. It's just so like all this craziness just for this like, you know, family-sized pack of diapers is just so funny.
It's a brilliant sequence. I think it just further establishes how chaotic this world is because these cops are so terrible.
They are firing fully in suburban area, like into houses,
like full of people,
store.
People everywhere. Like that's not what you're supposed to do. You shouldn't be firing at all. You should only fire in self-defense. He's not doing anything to you. You know, he's just running.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, they make it home. And so then we kind of cut to this sequence the next day where Nathan, Arizona, he finally gets to meet Smalls, who kind of comes in and he's like, "Hey, you want me to find your child? Because cops can't do it, but I can." And he has this wonderful quote where he says, "You want to find an outlaw? Hire an outlaw. You want to find a Dunkin' Donuts? Call a cop." And it's so perfect. So yeah, Nathan, Arizona ends up feeling he's kind of sus. I wonder why.
Yeah.
And
he's fully like attempting to sort of extort
Yes.
Nathan in Arizona, because he's like, "I'm gonna find this kid either way. You can either pay me $50,000, which is twice the amount that was offered in reward money, or I'm going to sell this baby on the black market." And he reveals like he himself was apparently sold on the black market.
Yeah.
And he's like, "That was for $30,000, but that was $1954. I'm sure I'd get more now," or something like that.
He has a tattoo on his arm that says like "Mama don't love me" or something like that.
He's just so cartoonishly like terrifying.
He's a Looney Tunes character. He really is. But Nathan, Arizona is kind of onto him. He's like, "I wonder if you've taken the child because I don't know about this."
Yeah.
So Smalls leaves. They don't make any sort of agreement. So then this starts the craziness of now everyone is chasing after the baby. Everyone is it's just crazy. So I forget how it happens. Maybe you can remind me.
Yeah. So the High's boss returns the next day to like, officially tell him that he's fired. But while he's there, he tells him like, "I know you kidnapped that baby. I know that baby's actually Nathan Jr." Which
Gail and Evel
overhear. And then they're like, "Well, this baby's valuable, so we're going to now steal it from High and Ed so we can collect the reward money." So now High and Ed are after Gail and Evel to get the baby back. Gail and Evel are going on their own little crime spree trying to rob a
Well,
bank.
they have this great confrontation fight sequence in the mobile home where Hai is fighting.
Yes.
He's like, no. He's like defending, trying to protect Nathan Jr., which is kind of cute. But it doesn't work. Gail
Their
and
house
Evel
is fully destroyed.
Fully destroyed. Gail and Evel get away. They take Nathan Jr. with them. And then we have this great speech from Hai. He's tied to a chair. Ed comes home, finds him tied up. And Hai goes into this great speech where he's like, you were right, I was wrong. You know, this is a family. We gotta protect our own, and we're together now, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I will get our son back, and we will be the family that we've always wanted to be. I swear to you, honey. I swear to you. You were right, I was wrong. You know, it's this great little monologue where he's like hyping himself up. And then the two of them are like, let's go get him. And Ed
is very upset with Hai at this point, by the way.
Yes.
She's just like, you know, she very much blames him for, you know, these two convicts. They're your friends. You allowed them to stay here. Now they've kidnapped this child, which, you know, she thinks is, you know, her mindset is like, this is our child, which of course it's not. But yeah, there's trouble between these two at this point.
Yeah. So then this kind of all, you know, leads into this final chase sequence, which I'm not really going to even go into all of it. It's just a lot of, so Glenn and Gail, they kind of leave thinking that they're going to, you know, give this baby back to their parent to receive the reward. But then because Nathan Jr. is so captivating, they're like, wait, the baby's ours. Like, we want to keep the baby. And so they kind of really start falling in love with this kid. And so they go to
rob a bank, which is the plan that they had in place before. And I love the fact that they're like, well, we can't leave the baby in the car because, like, what if we get, you know, thrown in jail and the baby will just be sitting out there? So they go to rob the bank and they take the baby with them, and they're just like holding this little baby in
a car seat. The baby's just in a car seat the whole time. Yeah. So yeah, they walk in, they're like, everybody freeze, get down on the ground. And the guys, there's this one guy who's like, do you want us to freeze or do you want us to get down on the ground? We can't do both. And he's like, get down on the ground.
And then freeze.
And then they're like, wait, where'd the bank tellers go? Did they leave? And then they're like, no, we're on the ground. You told us to get on the ground.
Like the shot of the empty bank counter and just the voice going, we're on the ground like you said. It made me really laugh.
So, yes, from what I remember, I don't remember why, but they don't end up successfully robbing the bank. Is it because the cops?
Well, no, they do.
Smalls
they get the
up,
money,
right?
but the teller's able to put this little canister of dye as like a preventative measure.
Yes.
So as they drive away, they start counting the money, and then the dye blows up, and they're both covered in like blue dye.
But isn't it like before the dye blows up, or is it after that they recognize that they left?
For the second time.
They left Nathan Jr. at the bank, and they're like, oh,
no. The thing is, they didn't even leave him at the bank. Twice, they put him on top, the little car seat on top of the car, and then they drive off, and the car seat just falls down, and little Nathan Jr. is fine. He's just sitting in the middle of the road. But the two of them are like, once they discover, they're like, ah!
Yes. So two times they put the baby on top of the car, and the car seat falls off. So yes. So when the blue ink or whatever it is kind of explodes over the car, they're trying to clean the windshield, and then that's when Hai and Ed kind of drive up. And so then they're all meeting in the same place. They're like, give us our baby back. And then Smalls shows up on his motorcycle, and then all of them are kind of like, what do we do? It's almost kind of like a Texas standoff or whatever it's called.
Yeah, it's like a Western standoff where Smalls is on his motorcycle with the baby, and then Hai and Ed are facing off against him, and yeah.
Yeah. So Hai ends up having a pretty impressive fight with Smalls. He holds his own, which I didn't expect.
I don't know that I would say he holds. He's a pretty impressive punching bag. Like he really does.
He does a good job not getting knocked out.
Yeah, there we go.
But yeah, so we end up in this kind of close hand-to-hand combat. He ends up pulling the what do you call it?
The pin out of the grenade.
Yeah, he pulls the pin out of the grenade.
Which because Small is just like has multiple grenades. Just
he's
like
loaded with grenades.
His vest for some reason.
Yep. So then Smalls blows up, and what happens with Gail and Evel at this point?
Well, they just they're like left behind with their car. They're not
right.
part of the
right.
stand up with Smalls.
Right.
Which, by the way, there is one little moment, which I'm curious to get your thoughts on, where right before he blows up Smalls, High notices this little tattoo that Smalls has. Yeah, which we saw at the very beginning of the movie. High has a very similar tattoo on his own body.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really go explained, but I, imagine there's some sort of symbolic connection between the two of them.
I think it makes me think of a little bit like maybe it's a sign that both of them had messed up childhoods or something like that. That was my gut reaction. I'm not. It did make me think of which these are two very different movies of very different qualities. I'm not saying they're even on the same level at all, but it made me think of the terrible movie Man of Steel when Superman is fighting, who is it? Zod, or who, I don't even remember who it is.
Yeah.
But the reason they stopped fighting, this is Batman versus Superman, I think.
Yeah, I know.
Superman's fighting Batman, I think, and then both of them are like, your
Save
mom's
Martha.
name is Martha.
Why did you say that name?
It's like, I guess we're friends now because we both have a mom who's named
except
Martha.
not here because High then blows up Smalls.
Right, exactly. But it made me think of that. Again, two very different movies of very different calibers of quality. But anyway. So yeah, Smalls blows up, and Ed and
Nicolas
High.
Cage almost played Nicolas Cage almost played Superman.
Honestly, it probably would have been better in that movie.
I would love to see that movie.
He'll probably do it at some point. Let's be honest.
I'm pretty sure they had like a CGI Nicolas Cage Superman show up in that recent awful The Flash movie.
The next Batman movie is Robert Pattinson and Nicolas Cage.
I mean, I would
and
not
Michael
say no.
Cera. Oh my gosh, let's make that movie right now. Hollywood's weirdos all in one movie. Anyway, so yeah, then High and Ed, they finally have Nathan Jr. back in their arms, back in their care. And what did they decide to do? They decide to return Nathan Jr. to his home.
Well, there's a really sweet, like Ed's explanation of this is really sweet, where she says like, this whole time I'd been thinking of this child as ours, but when I experienced what it was like for Gail, after Gail and Evel kidnapped, little Nathan Jr., I realized that this is exactly what we've done to Nathan Arizona, to the Arizonas. Like, this is not our child. We've just done this to someone else, and now I know what it feels like for that to happen to you. Yeah,
which is kind of continuing the trend of Ed taking the lead and High just being like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, let's do that. So they take Nathan Jr. home, they put him back in his bed, and Nathan Arizona walks into the room and sees them there. And it's this really interesting moment where Nathan is kind of,
scene so much.
He's kind of curious as to what's going on because he sees that they're very gentle and quiet and like, and he's like, who are you? And basically they tell him, Smalls was actually the one who took the baby. We're returning him. And then Nathan Arizona offers them the reward of $25,000. And they're like, we don't want it. And he can tell that they're very emotional and very attached to this baby. And so Nathan connects the dots in his mind. He's like, oh, you guys are the ones that took him, aren't you? And I don't think Ed and High actually ever say, yes, we are, but like they know.
They implicitly say yes because he asks why, and they explain, like, we can't have a child of our own. That's why we really wanted one.
Right. Yeah. So it just kind of creates this beautiful moment, and they just kind of ask him, they're like, can we look at him a little bit longer before we go? And Nathan's like, yeah, sure, you can. And then they end up leaving, and we have this montage at the end.
Yeah, well, it's sorry, just to, because this scene really made me tear up.
Yeah.
It's just this beautiful moment because, like, the whole movie, Nathan Arizona has been this kind of, slightly scummy stereotype of a businessman who's constantly plugging his warehouse at every given moment. But there are these little moments where you do see there is a good man underneath all of this who really does care about his family and is, able of kind of empathizing and caring about other people. And so this moment of understanding between them is, I just find it so beautiful because it's like, at the beginning of the movie, after the child is kidnapped, we find out that his wife took the other kids to stay at, I guess, her parents' house or something like that. So he's now feeling
She was afraid
loss.
the UFOs would come get them.
Right. But he's feeling the loss of his own family. And this, he says, like, she's not going to come back until little Nathan Jr. is home and we can all be reunited as a family again. And so he understands what it's like to really care about family and want to be with your children, with your wife, to be reunited in a place of love. And he can see that desire and that capacity in them. And so he has this grace for them. You know, he's like, I'm not going to call the cops. You know, he lets them look at him a little more. And they also reveal the fact that they are having all these marital difficulties because of the experience they've just been through. Ed is really mad at Hai for his irresponsibility, and they're planning to get divorced. And Nathan Arizona advises them, just like, I see the love between the two of you. Just think about this a little more. Sleep on this, you know, don't do anything right away. And yeah, I really loved that sequence between them, and just the grace and understanding between these three people who are so different. But the fact that they're able to have this moment of, you know, real humanity and understanding, I thought was very beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ending subverts expectations, because I think, at least in my opinion, because I feel like the tone of the movie suggests that the ending is going to kind of be, it makes me think of a little bit like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where the ending is like the police come through the window and then, you know, because they've kidnapped his boss, and then it's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You know, I feel like given the tone of this movie, the ending would be a little bit more funny in terms of like, oh, I'm calling the cops, and then it's this weird like final joke or whatever. But the movie doesn't do that. It ends on a very human, gentle sort of note, and I really like that a lot. It's a really great way to put a bow on this whole story, because this movie is very funny, and it is very just over the top and ridiculous, but it has, you know, a real heartbeat at the center of it. And I think that ending on that note really makes it a lot more impactful, and a movie that you kind of carry with you after it's over. It's not just like, oh, that was a really fun movie. It's like, that was a fun movie, but also I feel impacted by it, you know? And I think it's just really well done. And the fact that we have this very gentle, quiet moment of camaraderie and love with these three people at the end, which then leads into this final monologue where Hai is basically, you know, dreaming about his future and talking about his new understanding of what family is and what the purpose of life is and how he can find joy and, you know, being a human and a father and a husband and all of those things. It really is just, it's a beautiful ending that, in my opinion, really subverts expectations. And so, yeah, I don't know. This movie just ends and it makes me feel very warm inside. I'm like, oh, like that was a fun time, but also like, oh, yeah, you know, I can't even describe it. It's just like, oh,
yeah, exactly. The way it ends is so much, like you say, it subverts expectations. It's so much more open-ended than I would expect from a movie like this. Like I would expect a movie like this to end with like, oh, you know, they go to prison for 6 months, but then Ed realizes she's pregnant. And so it's like, you know, they are definitely going to have a baby of their own or something like that, you know, but it doesn't. It ends on this really open note of like, we don't know if we're ever going to be able to have children. We don't even know if we're going to stay together. But Hai has this sense of new clarity and perspective on life and the sense of hope. You know, he doesn't know if they're ever going to be able to have child, but he has this vision of themselves still together 40, 50 years in the future, surrounded by their children and grandchildren.
Cute.
And it's so sweet. The vision that he has too of like little Nathan Jr. growing up and then kind of watching from afar and seeing his progress and feeling like they may have, you know, influenced him, even if in some small way. It's just so sweet. And yeah, the final line where he talks about like, maybe we need to go somewhere else, maybe Utah. I don't know why that made me laugh.
I actually pulled up the monologue here. I want to read it.
Oh, please.
It's kind of long, but I think it would be a nice way to end this podcast episode, just kind of like on this note. So it says, it is kind of long, so bear with me, listener. But it says, That night I had a dream. I dreamt I was as light as the ether, a floating spirit visiting things to come. The shades and shadows of the people in my life wrestled their way into my slumber. I dreamed that Gail and Evel had decided to return to prison. Probably that's just as well. I don't mean to sound superior, and they're a swell couple of guys, but maybe they weren't ready yet to come out into the world. And then I dreamed on into the future, to a Christmas morn in the Arizona home where Nathan Jr. was opening a present from a kindly couple who preferred to remain unknown. I saw Glenn a few years later, still having no luck getting the cops to listen to his wild tales about me and Ed. Maybe he threw in one Polak joke too many. I don't know. And still I dreamed on, further into the future than I'd ever dreamed before, watching Nathan Jr.'s progress from afar, taking pride in his accomplishments as if he were our own. Wondering if he ever thought of us, and hoping that maybe we'd broaden his horizons a little, even if he couldn't remember just how they got broadened. But still I hadn't dreamed nothing about me and Ed until the end. And this was cloudier, 'cause it was years away. But I saw an old couple being visited by their children, and all their grandchildren, too. The old couple weren't screwed up, and neither were their kids or their grandkids. And I don't know, you tell me. This whole dream, was it wishful thinking? Was I just fleeing reality like I know I'm liable to do? But me and Ed, we can be good too. And it seemed real. It seemed like us, and it seemed like, well, our home. If not Arizona, then a land not too far away, where all parents are strong and wise and capable, and all children are happy and beloved. I don't know. Maybe it was Utah. So good.
So good. So well written.
Ugh.
You know, the way they write the dialogue where it's so distinctly from that character, and yet it is kind of the most poetic version of that character, you know? Mm-hmm. It's, yeah.
Damn it's you, so Coen Brothers. How are you so talented?
Not fair.
But yeah, are there any other moments in this movie that you want to talk about before we close out?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think we did a very good job of pretty much covering everything. And this is not a long movie, too. It's like 90 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And there's so much that happens.
So much that happens. I think we did a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump into critical responses because I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation about this. Because so when this movie first came out, given the reviews I looked at, a lot of people did not like this movie. They didn't get it.
That's insane.
But we'll get to that. So this movie has a 69 on Metacritic and is 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So I pulled 2 reviews to begin with that were positive. So one comes from Richard Corliss at Time, and both of these are from 1987, which is when the movie came out. So this one says, to their sidewinding Steadicam and pristine command of screen space, the Coens have added a robust humor, a plot that keeps outwitting expectations, and a surprising dollop of sympathy for their forlorn kidnappers, which I feel like is everything that we've said, you know? So that review really resonated with me. And then this one is from Gene Siskel at the Chicago Tribune, and it says, the film has an easy target in poking fun at rural folks, but it also has a warm message about individuality. It's also beautifully photographed. So I just wanted to make sure I picked reviews that mentioned like the visuals of it. So now we get into people who don't like this movie. Roger Ebert hated this movie. He hated it. So I pulled, again, this is going to be a long thing that I'm going to read, but I feel like Roger Ebert is just a very famous critic, and so I like to know his interpretations of things. So I'm just going to read.
And generally very thoughtful, even when I disagree with him.
Yeah, so I'm going to read some a little bit of an excerpt from his review. So here it goes. That's one of the problems with Raising Arizona. The movie is narrated by its hero, a man who specializes in robbing convenience stores, but it sounds as if he just graduated from the Rooster Cogburn School of Elocution. There are so many far be it from me's and inasmuches in his language that he could play Ebenezer Scrooge with the same vocabulary. And that's not what you expect from a 2-bit thief who lives in an Arizona trailer park. Maybe, of course, he just happens to talk that way. Even in this age of homogenized culture, a few people do retain distinctive and colorful speech patterns. That would be a good theory, except that everyone in Raising Arizona talks funny. They all elevate their dialogue to an arch and individual level that's distracting and unconvincing and slows down the progress of the film. And what Raising Arizona needs more than anything else is more velocity. Here's a movie that stretches out every moment for more than it's worth until even the moments of inspiration seem forced. Since the basic idea of the movie is a good one, and there are talented people in the cast, what we have here is a film shot down by its own forced and mannered style. The movie cannot decide if it exists in the real world of trailer parks and 7-Elevens and Pampers, or in a fantasy world of characters from another dimension. It cannot decide if it's about real people or comic exaggerations. It moves so uneasily from one level of reality to another that finally we're just baffled. Comedy often depends on frustrating the audience's expectations. But how can it work when we don't have a clue about what to expect, when the movie itself doesn't know what is possible and what is not? Raising Arizona is the new work of the Coen Brothers, Joel and Ethan, whose previous film was the superb thriller Blood Simple. That was a movie that pushed reality as far as it could go within the rigid confines of a well-made thriller. Raising Arizona needs the same kind of restraint. It's all over the map. If the same story had been told straight as a comic slice of life, it might have really worked. I kept thinking of Jonathan Demme's Melvin and Howard, the film about the gas station owner and the billionaire in which equally unliked events happened, but were very funny because they were allowed to be believable. That is so unbelievably harsh. Like, I feel like we didn't watch the same movie.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he just, and I guess other critics at the time just were not understanding what the Coen brothers were going for. It's just a mismatch of expectations. You know, once you understand the Coen brothers sensibility, then this movie is amazing. But especially if this is the first time that you've ever seen something like this, I can understand being like, wait, what is this? Where is this coming from? I don't understand the balance of fantasy and reality that they're going for. And yeah, I mean, this is insane to me, but I guess I understand in the sense of like, if you've never seen something done like this before, if you have no idea where these guys are coming from, it can be a sort of like, this is an alien world, you know, an alien, all these people who talk in such strange ways and all these crazy things keep happening. Like, I can't get on its level. I just pulled up, and after we finish, I'm going to go and watch it. I just pulled up the original Siskel and Ebert review of Raising Arizona back from 1987. You're aware, right, that Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert had a TV show together where they reviewed movies? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now knowing that Ebert didn't like it and Siskel did, I'm going to go watch it and be really fascinated to see what they say. Yeah,
that's actually a good idea. But yeah, so I was quite frustrated when I read that review because I feel like
so
he entirely missed the point and criticized it for reasons that I don't think are justifiable, but whatever.
No,
he was very harsh in his words. I'm like, okay.
I hope he later came around to it. I mean, I feel like once you see just one other Coen Brothers movie, I feel like he'd seen
Blood Simple.
Well, one other comedic Coen Brothers movie. Like, I hope once he saw Fargo, he was able to click into like, oh, no, I see what they're doing. But who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, but he's not alone. Like, there were lots of reviews of people from the time that were like, this movie is boring. This movie doesn't make sense. This
How on earth
all over
you
the
call
place.
This movie boring?
Well, the fact that, you know, there's a quote in this somewhere where he says like, it needs more velocity. I'm like, what?
How much more velocity could you possibly have?
Like, if you have any more velocity than this, it's uncut gems. Like, what? Yeah. Like, what do you want?
Man.
But anyway, so I just thought I wanted to mention that, like, there were lots of people at the time that this came out where there were some people that really appreciated it, but there were also a lot of critics that just didn't get it and really didn't like it. So,
and it goes to show, you know, movies that are panned today could be, you know, uncontested classics of tomorrow.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Big Lebowski is one of them, you know, although that's more of a cult classic. That's very like, you have to be a specific type of person, I think, to love that movie. Not judging those people. But yeah. Okay. So Geneva, what are your closing thoughts? Is there anything from this movie specifically that's going to stick with you?
I mean, like I said, the closing scene just really got me in a way that I was not expecting. So I think that will stick with me. I really look forward to rewatching this movie. I feel like with the Coen brothers, they always do such a great job of balancing movies that are entertaining with some unexpected sort of philosophical and sometimes even spiritual depth and themes and symbols that are just buried within their movies. And this movie to me is, it's mostly a Looney Tunes style romp, as we've said many times, but I did get the sense while watching it, I think there's more here that I'm not getting because this is my first watch and I'm still just taking things in. But I think on a second and third watch, it's going to be there's going to be other layers and other things that I'm going to get that I'm not necessarily getting now. So yeah, I'm really glad that I finally got the push to watch this movie, and I look forward to rewatching it many times over the years.
Yeah, like I said in the beginning, I think I enjoyed this movie more the second time around. So yeah, I hope you watch it again. I think, yeah, I look forward to that. Yeah, for me, I mean, it's still that scene where he's stealing the babies. I mean, it's just, that scene is so incredible to me. Just how it balances humor with the beauty of how it's shot, with the contrast of the chaos upstairs and the complete and utter, like, just complete chillness downstairs,
I feel like it's just such a good example of the fact that if you're a talented filmmaker and you're willing to really think things out and take the time, set up properly, think creatively, you can make a really funny set piece out of basically anything. Like, a guy looking at 5 babies in a crib and trying to choose one just becomes this absolute masterwork of insanity.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's top to bottom. It's the way it's shot. It's the acting. It's the costumes. It's the production design of that scene. It's the score that's happening the whole time. It's, all of it is just so well done. And I just have visuals in my brain of just the camera smoothly following this baby as it crawls on. It's so good. I will say, though, in addition to that, I think the ending hit me a lot more this second time. The first time around, like, it didn't impact me as much. But this time I was like, oh, wow. Like, maybe it's because I'm older and I think more about what do I want for my life? And will I ever achieve what I want in my life?
Which, by the way, just a random thought too is there's a movie that I had put on the queue and then later taken it off, and I was like, we'll do this later. But now, having watched this, I'm like, I feel like we need to do this soon because I'm really curious to see what Tatum thinks of it. It's called Sullivan's Travels, and it's by Preston Sturges, who is a big influence on the Coen brothers. And I feel like it shares that sort of, it's very much an influence on their sensibility of comedic chaos, but then like juxtaposing comedic chaos with like an unexpectedly poignant and empathetic note.
Yeah, I'd be down to watch it.
Which I love about all the Coen brothers movies.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the things that I think are gonna stick with me this second time around. Yeah, I told Geneva before we started recording, I want this movie to be in a regular rotation for me. I think I want to start watching it more often. And showing it to people, because I think a lot of people haven't seen this movie. It's not one of the more notable Coen brothers for people who aren't like film nerds who dive into their whole filmography, So yeah, I really love this movie. I think it's just so impressive that the Coen brothers have had such a handle on their style and what they want from the very beginning, even though they had literally zero filmmaking experience. Some people just have it, and that's good for them.
Well, I mean, zero professional filmmaking experience. I'm sure they were like shooting movies in their backyard as kids growing up, or
yeah. I should go back. I listened to the Team Deacons podcast. They had Joel Coen on it a few years ago. I don't remember what he said, though, about how he got started. Because the first question they always ask is, how did you get to where you are now? I'll have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I hope everyone enjoyed this discussion. I really enjoyed it. But yeah. So Geneva, what are we talking about next week?
What are we talking about next week? Oh, yes. Next week, we are covering a favorite film. Classic film. Just such a staple of my childhood. We're covering Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl from 2003.
Yes. Such a great. I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm so excited.
I love this movie. But yeah, so come back next week to hear our discussion about pirates. And yeah, we'll talk to you then. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like the show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.